Good evening all. So we have come back with a very new topic and interesting topic for many people across the globe: government and governance. How people can create a group of entities that govern them as a group of people and help them to achieve their common interest is one of the topics that many people have been thinking around for a very long time. That's what has created democracy. This is what has created autocracy. This is what has created the ruling systems across the globe, and has created a lot of political debates across the globe about governance, the best ways of governing people, the best way to form governments, and the best way to utilize resources for the common interest. And on this topic I shall start talking. So what is government? Government is a body that is responsible for achieving a group of targets or group of objectives on behalf of a group of people. So the animals have historically animals have always been trying to gather themselves as groups, but we always see that the number of animals is always limited. So you can see there is a wolf pack, you can see there is a lion's pack, and you can see there is a group of animals living together like elephants, and you can see maybe some group of fish living together and coordinating between each other, a flock of birds, and so on. However, we don't see the same in animals. We don't see the same level of groups that humans have managed to create. And by that I mean that humans have managed to create a much bigger and larger groups. Countries like China are more than 1.3 billion people, and you would never see any species in the world have managed to gather itself in one entity like China or like India or even like the United States and so on. So human beings have managed to create a way of governing themselves that can build a much large groups of individuals, and it can help them to achieve their goals. Now, the problem with that animals are still more efficient than human beings. So yes, humans have managed to build large scale gatherings and groups, but they lost a lot of their efficiencies along the way. So they started with trying to form some kind of central government, and this central government will be responsible for a huge number of people, and it will be responsible for allocating resources and taxation and so on in order to be able to govern these people effectively. And what happens is that with the levels of communication technology that have been developing, people start to think maybe decentralization is better than centralization. And we see, for example, something like this in the United States, where you see there is a state government and you see there is a federal government that gather the 52 states together, and there is the state government which it has a governor, and he's responsible for the whole of the whole of the state and so on. So this kind of government have been effective for some time. Now there is a very strong discussion about that we need to build more resilient system, that we need to build more efficiencies within our governing. So there is a lot of talk that we need to build some level of decentralization. And I think I am in favor of decentralization, but I am not sure of the level of decentralization that should be done. So things like army, things like security, things like water resources, it's very hard to think about them in a decentralized way. And sometimes it can work, in many cases it can't work. Some countries or some communities, they can't survive these issues without a proper central government and the proper central command. So between centralization and centralization, that was a very let me say, a very wide topic. What is the level of centralization we have to adapt? What is the level of decentralization we have to adapt? How we can become, through centralization or decentralization, more effective, more efficient. The second thing is about trust. And trust is a very important element that human beings have not overcome yet. Trust is one of the worst flaws of human beings. especially if they want to gather in long-term commitments. So in order to build trust, people need or tend to need a very long time to develop trust with each other. This is based on history, based on different experiences, and based on availability of guarantors or lack of guarantors. So trust is about, can I trust this individual to achieve a particular task? Can I trust this individual to be to control his behavior in a particular way that does not affect my interest or does not affect my does not put me in a risky situation? And we see this, for example, by giving people a power of attorney. So it's very hard to act on behalf of another individual if he does not provide you the power of attorney. So if an individual provides you the power of attorney and and told you do such and such, you go there and you do you do the work that is required. However, there is no guarantee of how you will be conducting this work. So trust is something. While there was a paper that helps other people understand that you are working on behalf of another individual. So if I say I'm working on behalf of, let us say, Subhi. So I'm working on behalf of Subhi, and then we discover that, and I was a liar. Then people some people would believe me. But in order to avoid this problem, so they created power of attorney that is signed and certified by a central authority like the ID registration authority or like the public notary. So if I have a power of attorney that is signed by a public notary, and you demonstrate this for different people to do a particular task on behalf of the other individual, it would be sufficient for them to help you to do the work. Now, while it would be sufficient for them to help you to do the work, how you will be doing it and how you will control your behavior through this power of attorney, it can be very constrained, and sometimes it can be very general. Sometimes it depends on your trust with the first individual. My trust with Subhi. So you always think how we can develop trust between different people so they can operate in a much faster way, in a more effective way, and build much stronger teams that are more agile and that is agile and very productive. And with that, it would always be a challenge. So you should always be thinking, what is the time needed to develop a trust in a particular entity? Why trust-related problems emerge? How we can have guarantors on the behavior of a particular entity or a particular individual. Sometimes insurance can provide that. Sometimes insurance does not provide that. So the insurance also did not develop to think about guaranteeing a particular personal behavior. So no one will guarantee how you will behave in a certain situation. They say people will change. You might behave in this way, then you might be doing things differently. So people will always be thinking about guarantors in order to guarantee a particular individual behavior. So that was about. So the second, we talked about centralization and decentralization, and we talked how we can build better government through centralization and decentralization, and we think about the right level. The second one is about trust, and the third one is about governing people of small communities. So these communities, like the community of school or the community of a neighborhood, tend not to have a proper structure because of the availability of a bigger government bodies. However, if they have some level of governance within their neighborhood or within their extended families or within their school, it might help them to achieve particular targets in a more positive way. For example, the way that a particular neighborhood let me say the cleanness of a particular neighborhood sometimes is associated with the municipality, is not associated with the neighborhood itself. So you go to a certain neighborhoods and you see that they are dirty, while you go to others and you see that they are clean. So if there was some form of government within the neighborhood level or within the school level that help them to become more clean or more effective, and they can solve some of the problems they face, then I do think we will have a much better world. So we need some kind of models for small families, small neighborhoods, schools. So if we look at the universities, many universities have developed their own way of government, their own way of governance, and their own way of government, and they try to be sustainable, and they try to gather endowments and to be an economical catalyst, not only for the university itself but for the larger city. If we think about our neighborhoods and schools and small extended families in a way that we think about university as an economical decentralized model, maybe at one point we will reach the stage where we have a more effective way for governing ourselves. So I think there are a lot of things that needs to be done about how humans tend to govern themselves, and there is a lot of discussion about how to form government. A lot of people say democracy, a lot of people say autocracy, and a lot of people how different parties will behave. But also, I think there should be some new level of organization, even on a minor level. So if we looked at the European Union as a governance model, which is a pity, we see that the United Kingdom thought that it's better for them to leave the EU. They thought it's just too much centralized, that people stopped knowing their politicians and stopped knowing who represent them in the general government, who represent them in the EU Parliament. So this is also an issue we have to learn from the European Union model in terms of government and in terms of how they conducted their regulation and what were they effective and what kind of problems they faced. And so this is a way for people to build a huge democracy. So the European Union is a way that trying to build a huge democracy. We need to look at India, another very big democracy, how they managed to govern themselves. And maybe we don't need the same level of skill, but we have to look for I think for countries like Jordan or for the countries in the Gulf, we need to think about small level governments like neighborhood government, school government, and maybe some kind of extended family government, how we can build proper government structure and proper guarantors for a particular person or a group behavior. I think another topic that I need to talk about, that government and governance was always about the best ways of using resources, and the best ways for using resources is something that different individuals have been thinking about for a long time, and they develop plans, they develop a cost allocation, they think about different projects, they develop different contractual methods in order to be more efficient, more effective, different ways to eliminate the elements of risk, bringing different entities like financial institutions, insurance, and so on, to try to govern a particular project and make sure that it works as predicted and as it was hoped for. In many cases, we are still having some level of problems with our governance, but I think with some concepts like systems engineering, some concepts are working in a very complex, large-scale projects. Not always. Simple governance can be very effective in small projects. I don't think we do have a very big problems in small projects, but we have a very big problem with large projects. But in terms of governance, I think we have a very big problem on small scale governance. We don't have that level of problem on large scale governance. So that was my view on governance and government, and I am advocate of thinking of new ways that can help people become more effective and can help people achieve better results. So that's my talk about government and governance. I wish you a great evening, and we'll see you on another talk. Salam.